Good afternoon. My name's Frank Clifton. I'm the Innovation Manager at Scottish and Southern Electricity Networks distribution business. And we've been working on Project Leon, which is an extension of Project Leo, taking it to the next stage. Project Local Energy Oxfordshire Neighbourhoods is what we've called it. And this is about accelerating the decarbonisation of energy demands and creating an enabling environment for homes, small business and communities to transition to net zero and at pace and at scale we need to achieve both Oxfordshire's and the wider country's net zero targets. In Project Leo, we implemented the Smart and Fair Neighbourhoods concept, where we actually implemented some net zero transition measures into small communities across Oxfordshire. And it was well received and produced benefits by the users. It showed benefits to the electricity network and the wider energy system. So what we want to do with Leon is take a systems innovation approach to develop the tools, commercial arrangements, and the local governance arrangements, which we mentioned a number of times today, to try and drive that transition at pace across the county to achieve implement the measures we need to do to actually let us achieve this net zero goal. So this is actually working at the secondary network level and the LV level, right at the grid edge, to try and implement that net zero transition at scale. So we're dealing with small communities, small groups of stakeholders, and trying to scale that across the whole of Oxfordshire. So I just want to pass on to my colleague Barbara, who will explain more about the project. Barbara.
Unmute. Thanks, Frank. Next slide, please. And the next one, thank you. So this slide shows pretty much where we got to with Project Leo. And where we're working from here is working back from the end result that we all need, which is a transitioned grid edge, which means that we have we transitioned to a renewably powered electricity system, but have only had to double the size of the networks in doing that. And in order to achieve that good outcome, we have to get everybody participating in helping to transition the grid edge. So in Leo, we understood that every household and business has to be flex ready, and that's what we call future fit. It's not just retrofit now, it's future fit. Those flex ready units then have to be enabled to work together in smart community energy schemes behind a secondary substation. And in order to help that happen, we have to have an enabling environment created that is governed by a local system that makes this possible. A partnership including the local network operator, the local authorities, local businesses and local communities. So this is really building on what we started in Leo in Oxfordshire. But we think that if we get this right in Oxfordshire, it will be able to scale right across the country. And we need to do this quickly because the networks recognise that they can't invest, even if they wanted to, and even if they wanted customers to pay for that, in tripling the size of the network that we'd otherwise have to do, because we don't have the time available. So at the grid edge, this is really the game in town. And at that point, I'll pass on to Malcolm for him to explain where we've got to in developing this thinking in the discovery stage.
Thanks, Barbara. Next slide, please. So this shows a little bit more in detail of how those different aspects fit together. I'd like to draw your attention to the bottom of the screen to start off with, which shows that there are 3 different scales that we're looking at. So from left to right, we're looking at kind of like the 5-year horizon is where typically bulk supply point and grid supply points planning process take that approximate length of time. Then the next one and the next one along is the 2 to 4 year time horizon is kind of like the decision-making process and implementation at the primary or HV level. And then at the 0 to 1 level, year time frame is more or less what the secondary transformers need to be adapted at. What's interesting is there's also a corresponding scale for the social scales associated with those electrical scales we'll discuss later. So if we start on the diagram from the left-hand side, we can see that one of the key things we need to be doing is bringing together the DNO planning process together with the local area plans and together with key stakeholders and key end users in the system. And that's the role of the local net zero coordinator, is to bring those together to make sure that we have strategic plans in place. The question is then, how do you translate that into local areas? And this is the role of the grid edge coordinator, which will be interfacing between those strategic plans and the implementation of both the future fit and the local smart community energy services or SCARE services providers. And in those three need to be working together to make sure that the processes between them are all aligned to deliver the correct service. If you go to the next slide, please, and Timur.
Thank you. So obviously we need to show that the solutions we're developing and solutions we're proposing, they deliver benefit. And in order to achieve that, we looked at what the future might look like if we don't do anything. So we tried to establish a counterfactual between now and 2050. So looking at from the network perspective, looking at the household perspective as a customer, but also societal, what impact the societal level, but also environmental level. And then we looked at how the solutions that we've been talking about, the future fit, smart community energy scheme, and the local net zero coordinator, what benefits do they deliver at each of those levels, and trying to assess with the target of assessing, quantifying, and also deliver a qualitative benefit from each of those levels. So for example, as Barbara mentioned earlier, Future Fit can deliver a flex-ready solution, which brings in LCTs, but also energy efficiency, and make it interoperable with the future energy system, and in a way that also supports the customers in a way of quality assurance, and also being comfortable that they are fit for the future. They don't have to then further invest anymore to be compatible with the future, with how the system develops. Whereas Smart Community Energy Scheme is looking at how can we optimize self-consumption of local generation, local flexibility, and local demand? How do we optimize all of that together, both at the household level, but also at the community level, which then brings quite a wide range of benefits, both the networks and the customer. So we're flattening the curve, we're flattening the peaks, and maximizing how much of energy, renewable energy, can be consumed within the local area. And finally, looking at the local net zero coordinator, which then you can see it's almost like a connecting point between the strategic plans and actually enabling local area energy plans and delivering those, enabling those benefits from LAPs. Collectively, across GB, we anticipate could achieve up to 90 billion savings between now and 2050, as well as additional carbon reduction. But we're looking to further develop those solutions and further quantify those values. Thank you. And I'll hand back over to Barbara.
Thanks, Timur. Next slide, please. And so just to summarize all of that, the discovery phase, we've really been building on Project Leo to become Leon, focusing on the neighborhood scale, right where we all live and work, where all the energy is used, in fact. And the size of the prize we're quite surprised at, which is, as Timur was saying, £90 billion, which is about 3 times more than we were expecting it to be. Second thing we've really understood is that this is systems innovation. It's not widgets that are put together in specific ways. It's how you create a system with positive feedback loops in terms of how people interact with it, which really operates right at that grassroots level where we all live and work, in a way that complements regional governance reform, but really takes that right down to where we all are. Complements the digital spine by, again, really taking that right to the LV level. Includes, therefore, a grid edge coordinator role, which is about helping communities and households to spot opportunities and then take them. And it's about the synergy between Project Leo and the Pioneer Places, Net Zero Pioneer Places project we've got going in Oxford called Future Fit One Stop Shop, which is about how you deliver those future fit units that are so critical to the implementation of Leon. And then the third thing, which we think is really exciting, is understanding the investment engine. That is the efficient use and timing alignment of investment at the very local level with investment in the network. So there's that annual drumbeat at the LV level, which really can drive the speed that we might transition the grid edge, and do that in a way that really helps the network operators to make their investment strategic, wise, efficient, and therefore best for all of us. And we can align our task programs together so that we can respond to that drumbeat to learn and succeed fast. So passing back to Frank.
Thanks, Barbara. If you just move on, please. Excuse me. So what have we done in this first discovery phase? There's four main areas you can see there. We've really, as Barbara said, we've taken that retrofit concept and developed this future fit model to make sure that the homes and the businesses are ready for the future. Future fit, as the name suggests. And we've developed two very detailed customer journeys for a domestic customer and a non-domestic customer. And that's, as we said, that's been delivered in collaboration with the Pathfinder project, FOSS project. We've taken the idea of those future fit units being part of a smart community energy scheme or service, SCES, as we call it, and that's really building on what we've demonstrated in Leo and trying to put the arrangements in place to make those smart community energy schemes sustainable, both environmentally, but more as importantly, economically, so they can actually stand on their own 2 feet and continue to work. And that includes getting people to participate and stay and remain participating in them for the duration of for the long term. When it comes to the coordination and governance has been mentioned a lot this morning, which is reassuring. It's obviously a recognised issue. We see additional role for a grid edge coordinator to actually get involved in the delivery and the doing of this, to actually make it happen, take it off the page and bring it into reality in people's homes and streets. And we also fully recognise it's a changing landscape, so we need to make sure whatever we are doing here within this project dovetails with all the other work that's going on with regional system operator, local area energy planning, and our local authority partners, Oxford and Oxfordshire, are key to helping us make sure we're aligned with all the other work that's going on in the industry. And as you can see, we're starting to develop a pretty detailed and rigorous CBA to try and assess the qualitative, quantitative benefits of this for the network, for wider society and the overall system in total. And it's producing some very, very encouraging results. So if you just move on, please. I'd just like to talk a wee bit more about what we're doing in Alpha. So if you could just go to the final slide, please, Anita, that would be grand. So what we're going to do, we're going to continue to focus on those Leon pillars, developing the regulatory changes we need to enable some of these things to happen, particularly in the SCES field, developing some of the commercial models to allow SCESs to be implemented and developed and operated in the long term, some of the digital tools we need to let the information flow, the skills we need to enable future fit, and the supply chain we need to deliver all of these methods. But importantly, we need to make sure all of this works for all the different customers. So it's an inclusive approach. It's not restricted to people that can afford it. It's available to all to ensure a just transition. So that's really important for us. I think the other thing which has been really, really enlightening for the work we've been doing from Leo is this different approach to the various investment time horizons. So as Malcolm talked about earlier on, we do a lot, as a DNO, we do a lot of planning for the higher voltage networks. It's got a long lead time, takes a lot of planning, and we have dozens of grid supply points. We have probably hundreds of primary substations, but we have 100,000 secondaries in SSEN. If we've got to upgrade all of those and their associated LV networks, so there's probably 500,000 of those potentially, we need a much more agile and a completely different approach to managing them. So we tend to plan them 6-12 months ahead. And if we can get that in tune with what our stakeholders are doing, we can really, really accelerate and enhance that program to deliver maximum benefits. And as Barbara says, actually do the investment in the right place at the right time to avoid us doing it once and doing it right and making use of the capacity we create. And that bottom-up approach is going to bring benefits all the way up the system. But it needs to be agile, it needs to be swift, and it needs to be really, really smart how it does that to avoid us getting completely bogged down. And we're also going to spend a lot of time refining that benefit case and quantifying what we can do to demonstrate this, what can be achieved by having a locally based energy system, because ultimately it needs to involve the people that are going to be in the homes, etc. And we're obviously preparing for a beta trial. We will develop in detail potentially 2 real life trials, and both in the hopefully in the SSEN area, but perhaps in a completely different geographic and economically sort of a different economically. The right words here. Sorry, a completely different demographic from what we've used in Oxfordshire. Okay, so that's us finished. So we're happy to answer any questions and take on board any comments that anyone may have. Thank you, David.
Thanks a lot, Frank. You're not the only one who gets caught up on their words in these webinars.
Sorry, mate.
With some of the jargon we use.
Far too much.
We did have one question about
On
what specific community assets will be used as part of the SCES. And Timo has already provided an answer that you're fairly agnostic to the type of community assets. Or
absolutely.
As long as it's the grid level.
Yep.
I've probably got a question which links to that a little bit, is with your investment work stream, which seems to be primarily focused on unlocking network investments, what's the strategy for enabling sort of equitable access to grid edge assets for lower income or those that don't have the financing to be able to do that? Is that the community aspect of this which unlocks that?
I'm tempted to let Barbara answer that.
Thanks, Frank. I unmuted in anticipation of that.
Good.
The focus should have come across actually as an interlocking investment, David. So thank you very much for asking the question. And so it's a combination of household and business investment behind the meter, community investment of generation assets, storage assets, and also new businesses to run the scares in front of the meter, and network investment to enable all of that, particularly secondary substation level monitoring and modelling. And the question about being inclusive and enabling everybody to take part in this is a really good one. And for me, that question is all about how you get the investment in behind the meter for each business building, each household and each business. And that's one of the questions that we've been looking at in the FOSS project in terms of the innovative financing models that might be available for that, which themselves need regulatory tweaks alongside the regulatory tweaks we need for the management of the network. So quite a lot of system innovation needed, but I think that, that inclusivity becomes behind the meter.
Yeah,
and allows you to take part in front of the meter.
But it's that whole suite of approaches that is required to really unlock it as well.
Aye, it's the joined up nature of what we're trying to do, David, and bring it all together in as agnostic a way as we can. In fact, it's not a contradiction.
And whilst you've mentioned some of the other projects, I was wondering if you could just give your perspectives on leveraging different funding routes and how you've managed that, good and bad, because one of the key objectives for us as a programme is to try and break down some of these silos and make it a little bit easier for people to navigate. Any advice or pitfalls to avoid?
I don't know. It's helpful, okay, and it's useful, and we've I think we've been we've obviously got the FOSS project, but it brings itself some challenges because it introduces some uncertainty because they're on slightly different timelines and like. But I think we can work with that, but should allow us to if successful, we can then deliver a lot more over and above what we have already. And I think we kind of managed that with Project Leo and the PIFA program, and I think we're hoping to take that same philosophy going forward and get more out of this. I mean, Barbara, you're looking at the other end of the funding spectrum.
Yeah, that's right, Frank. I mean, I think as a consortium, we've always taken quite an aggressive approach to leveraging, if I can put it that way. You know, our own model at the Low Carbon Hub, we're run as a profit-making energy business, but our profit legally has to be used for community benefit. And every pound that we make in community benefit, we know we've leveraged 14 times. And that's the sort of approach that we're bringing into to Leon. And I think the sort of approach that Timo was taking into the counterfactual business modeling. So leveraging is a key word for the Leon consortium.
Yeah, and perhaps when we do our evaluation, we'll have to do a bit of negotiation in with your other teams on who claims these ginormous benefits. Yeah. We'll probably have to split them, to be fair. Yeah, and just a note on that is, particularly as the projects start scaling through phases, if they're successful, I think we're open-minded to look at ways at which we make the monitoring and governance of these projects, which are coordinating different funding routes, as streamlined as possible, because we don't want to get bureaucracy in the way of the good, really.